This one today is a touchy one, it's a tricky one, and it's so simple to fall into that we don't even realize what we're doing sometimes. Devouring parents. What even is a devouring parent? A devouring parent is the kind of parent that gets their children to do a lot of what they should be doing. They get these children to be basically validating themselves. They have an adult relationship with their child, and it can be so simple to fall into, like I said before. We don't even realize when it's happening, and over time, this thing can just get worse and worse and worse and worse. I've actually had it in my own life, and recently I've seen it a couple of times with just different parents and people that have been around me, and every single time it causes problems. We end up with children that can't do things for themselves, they're completely reliant and dependent, and then usually they're going to end up going out into the world and ending up getting used and abused themselves, leading to even more trauma, because this stuff traumatizes children. That's why this is so important to avoid. So the easiest way that we can start to avoid this stuff is to keep our children independent. We don't want to make them dependent on us. We need them to be able to do things themselves. This can start with like those early young ages. I've seen people that take things that have been given to their children and just put them together themselves. It's like what I've been talking about in the last video. If we're not going to actually let our children struggle, if we're not going to actually push them and help them to improve, if we're not going to give them the skills to navigate life but to cope, even more importantly, just to have fun and to do things actually on their own, if we take that opportunity and that responsibility from them, they're never going to grow, they're never going to learn, and they're just never going to know how to do these things. What we end up doing when we're a devouring parent is we're enabling. We're letting these children just get away with everything that they can. We're letting them continue their bad habits and their bad behaviors. We're usually trying to come from a place of care. We're usually trying to actually to build up our children, but instead we're making them incapable. We're taking away their ability to actually learn, to actually grow, and to actually take care of themselves. We need to make able children, not to just enable them to stay exactly where they are. The biggest thing that I've seen is that these parents usually, they're codependent themselves in their relationships, in their friendships, and then ultimately with their children. They're trying to find their own validation with the relationship that they've got with the child. This can happen, like I've been saying, without us even realizing that it's coming. This, again, usually comes from trauma in our own childhoods. If we can't get past and get through and process and even be aware of these things and the ways that we've been hurt, we're going to do the same kind of hurt and worse to our children every single time. It's all about just actually being an adult, and we need to be an adult and to be strong and to be there for our children instead of trying to make them the adult for us. A lot of times people with these kind of hurts and traumas and this codependency problem, they've either been set up by an abusive parent themselves, or they've fallen into being an abuser knowingly or unknowingly, and they're just taking from their child. They're basically trying to seek their own fulfillment through the child and through the people in the relationships around them. Again, with hurt and pain and depression and mental health issues, this can be really tricky to even realize that it's happening. But once it starts, it's so much harder to pull back and to stop. That's my entire philosophy on all of these things. As soon as we realize a problem, as soon as we want change, it's easier now to make a change. It's either going to be hard now or it's going to be much, much harder later. That's really our choice. Hard now or harder later. Coming from Australia, we've actually got a thing called tall poppy syndrome, and I think that a lot of the times that we've got a devouring parent, it's the same thing. There's a weird dynamic and a weird jealousy that can come in. And what tall poppies are those people that are popping up above the social norm. We as Australians tend to tear those people down and to do what we can to try and get them back in line, basically. It sounds terrible because it is terrible. And like I'm saying, a lot of times these devouring parents are doing this to their children, whether they realize it or not, whether they're trying to seek their own fulfillment or whether they're trying to run from their past hurt. That's why it's so important for us to heal ourselves so that we can move forward and make strong, happy, and competent children. If we can't work on ourselves and show children that it's okay to change, that it's good to keep improving, how can we be expecting it from them as well? The other huge problem with these kind of parents is that their child's serving them. It could be doing chores around the house. It could again be those emotional needs, like I'm saying, with a codependent. But at the end of the day, a devouring parent is using their child to fill some kind of need and to have their child serve them in ways that just aren't right and aren't appropriate. We don't realize that this can come along as our children get older. It is so easy to stay stuck in that 5, 6, 7-year-old age for these children and parent them like that when they're turning into those 10 to 14-year-olds that need to grow. They're like a terrible 2 again when they're 10 to 14. They've gone from being completely dependent as a baby, to detaching a little bit and moving into their own world, to coming back to being attached again after those twos are done, to then pushing away and finally trying to figure out themselves in the world. After this 10 to 14-year-old, they're going to come back for a little while, try and attach to us again to learn just those last few little bits and pieces, and then they're basically off on their own, and now we're going to end up with an adult relationship. If we're just continually having our child to serve us and we're making them fill in for our deficiencies and fill in where we don't want to do things around the house, we're going to damage them, and they're probably just going to want to be lazy when they get to there, because it'll finally feel like a breath of fresh air and a bit of space from the devouring and the taking that the parents have done to them. As I said before as well, this is all based in trauma. We're traumatizing the child. We've ended up with a traumatized child, and it's usually because there's some level of trauma that isn't addressed in the adult, or that there's bad coping skills that have worked so far. But now that there's a dynamic where we need to teach another person how to be a person, we need to take this this level of healing, this level of coping, and the capacity that we've got to deal with our own hurt, our own pain, and our own trauma to that next level, so that we can equip our children to deal with the same things as they come up in their life. Everyone has some level of trauma. It just depends how you want to understand that and how you want to phrase the word trauma, how you want to play the semantic game and what you actually mean. There's the extreme end where there's massive hurt, massive pain, and assaults happening, but little things and lack of attention can be a massive trauma for people as well. We never know how what's happening is going to influence and affect the person around us unless we spend that time with them. That is the easiest way. If we spend the time, we can see these things and we can correct the mistakes. There's all the bad information. There's all the trash. Here's how we fix that stuff. Here's how we help our children to actually be stronger and move past being a devouring parent and to avoid those tendencies in our parenting. As I keep saying, and as a lot of these other videos on the channel at the moment packed with, boundaries. If we're not setting good, proper, strong boundaries, nothing is ever going to work as a parent. It is so much better and so much easier when we have solid boundaries and smart boundaries, there's a video on that, around our children. These boundaries need to be movable, they need to be flexible, they need to be worked out with the child, and they need to always be for a purpose. We're not just putting in boundaries and rules for no reason. That's punishment. We're trying to discipline our children, make a safe fence around them, expand that fence as they get more capacity so they can learn and grow, because they are going to make mistakes, but these boundaries are going to keep them safe, teach them how to be responsible for themselves, and help them to make good choices as they navigate the world. If we try and just keep them completely fenced in at home, as soon as that fence is gone, they are going to bolt, they're going to actually hurt themselves, and we're not going to be there like we are when they're in the home to support them, to pick them back up, and to help them. That is the massive danger of a devouring parent. The next thing, well, it's the same thing. With the boundaries, we need to be planning this pullback. Like I've just said, they're going to get out of the home, and if we haven't planned how we're going to pull back and enable them more and more, then it's going to come to a point where we go, whoa, I haven't taught them this, that. If we think this through, as soon as we start to notice those little moments of independence and we start to plan how to make them more capable and to do ourselves out of a job as a parent or a carer, we're going to end up with a child that's completely competent, completely just ready to go and tackle the world. And they're going to be willing, ready, and able to ask for help when they actually need the help. We're watching from the sidelines as much as possible rather than trying to play the game for them and putting them on the bench. We don't want to bench them from their own lives. Why do we do that when they're younger? Why don't we treat them like a person, whether they're 2 or 72, and just help them do the things that they want in the way that is best for them? If we're doing those two things, thinking of their best interest, but keeping their wants at the forefront, we're going to smash this every time. And I've said it before, let's face it, children are easy to manipulate. We can give them the choices that we want them to make. As long as they've got alternatives and they actually get to make the choice, they're going to smash this life. The next thing that we need to be doing is spending quality time. If we don't have quality time with these children, if we're not putting in those hours, even for 5-10 minutes here and there through the day, if we're not making that time and we're not around them, we're not talking with them, and more importantly, listening to them, we're not going to be able to know who they are. We're not going to know where they've got issues. We're not going to know how we can actually help and serve them. That's what this whole game is about, helping and serving our children. Quality time is exactly how we do that stuff. That's what's actually called the 5 love languages. I've got a video on that as well. The 5 love languages help us to see how people actually hear and feel and express the love that they need in their lives. If we can learn the 5 love languages and give the language that our child needs and wants, we're going to go incredibly far as parents. The next thing we want to be doing, or the last thing, is to just be enabling them. We want to be giving them choices. We want to, enable them, but not in that bad way. We want to enable them to make the choices. We want to enable them to have discussions. When we're setting these boundaries, we need to talk with them about what's going to be happening. That is the best way to win this stuff. We need to be enabling them to actually have decisions that really matter and really carry weight. They need to suffer the consequences when we're gone. We might as well let them practice some of these consequences now. We've got natural consequences, we've got earned consequences, well, I can't even say it anymore, and then we've got unintended consequences. We can't control all of that stuff, and we need to be ready, willing, and able to sit back and let our children make those mistakes for themselves while we're there to support them. If we can let them stumble, if we can let them fall and not try and catch them and steady them every single time, that is how we make sure that they're resilient enough, strong enough, smart enough, and humble enough to make the good choices and to get the help they need as they get older. We need to hand over the control to them. If we're trying to hold on to that control forever, there's only so long that you can hold on before everything just breaks and you run out of strength, and that's when you lose grip, that's when you completely lose control and these people slip away. I'm going to check my microphone right now and come back with a story. My microphone was still recording anyway. All right. 2 people. One right now is somebody with a child with incredibly high needs, and I've seen from the get-go, from when I first met them, before even knowing what was going on with the child, I just knew that they were a devouring parent. They're too in control. They won't let the reins go. As soon as there's an issue that's causing them a problem, they're putting massive boundaries around the child or the person and not letting them actually make choices. They're not letting them actually deal with the consequences because they don't want to be inconvenienced. All this has done is enable this child to be completely lazy, enable them to boss people around, and now they're starting to deal with violence, actual violence, because they won't let the person make decisions. They've put so many little boundaries in, and they've made so many choices that have taken the power and the choice and the option away from this person that now they're lashing out and coming back. Every time that we want to take control to make our lives easier, every time we throw down a lie to our child and decide that it's easier to just say whatever we want to say, just like the Santa Claus lie, as soon as we're telling them those things, we're taking away their power, we're taking away their choice, and we're becoming a controlling abuser. Whether we want to admit it, whether we realize it or not, that's what we're doing. The problem with these things slowly festering and building up is, if there's no vent for this, if there's no way to get it out, if there's no choice and no option, one day that bottle is going to break, and all of those things that have been shoved in there, in this child's emotions, are just going to come out, and they're going to be aimed at us. We don't want that. We need to give them the choice, the option, and again, let them deal with the consequences now, because otherwise we're going to have a much bigger problem later. The second person, they used to push their child down so much, they used to do absolutely everything for their child. I think that a lot of it was because of their own past, but they made their own choices too and kept doing these things, even when it was shown to them. We had the exact same issue there. I've seen this family, I've seen this stuff just completely fall apart. They basically lost their child, and it was all because they were doing everything, they didn't have a relationship, and they were just basically on a power trip without even realizing what they were doing. They had all the excuses in the world, they had all the enabling in the world themselves, and that's why this stuff fell apart. I'm surprised if that relationship even ends up going anywhere, because at this point, I think everything is just hanging on by a thread. We need to allow our children to make choices, to make the dumb mistakes, because otherwise we're living their life for them. We're not going to be around forever, and they're not going to deal with that for very long. Think this stuff through, have a look at some of the other videos on boundaries, let me know what you think down in the comments, and I know that you've got this. If you're watching a video like this and if you've lasted this long, you actually care about what's going on, you're looking for the information, and you're trying to actually help your child out. Good job to you. You've got this. Seriously. See you later.